Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Anthony Farina, Chief Communications and Brand Officer of Biotech giant CSL. Anthony, it is always a joy to spend time talking with you. So welcome to the show.
Deborah, it's one of the things that I look forward to whenever we get together. It's one of the highlights of my week. So you've made the highlight of my week today.
Oh my goodness, and it's a Friday to boot. So I mean,
Woohoo!
what more could we ask for? Well, thank you. Thank you. And let's segue to maybe a more serious subject besides fun and weekends.
Hmm.
We maybe we shouldn't. You and I have shared a lot of conversations about CSL's evolution. I remember when you came on as the company's first communications leader, and then you've evolved to really unifying the whole CSL family as you've expanded.
Hmm.
Now there's another milestone. According to Brand Finance, CSL is the number one fastest growing brand in the pharmaceutical category with a brand value growth of over 30%. Tell us about this extraordinary accomplishment.
Well, it's just been a wonderful run. And I think this is a great example of plan your work and work your plan. It's amazing. I've been at CSL now, 10 years. It just marked it a couple weeks ago. And surely we really had a plan in place to really drive the brand. And one of the things that we said early on was we wanted it to be differentiated from other biopharmas. So you have your traditional communications, messaging, and those kind of things, and we took a bit of a, what I would say, a more progressive, maybe differentiated approach, and that has paid off. So, as you mentioned, in 2022, we rebranded the company with the acquisition of CSL Vifor, and that has really shot off. We're just delighted to be recognized with the growth of our brands. And, we'll probably get into some of this a little bit later in terms of purpose and plans and performance and, all that's connected there. But we're just delighted to really rise above the crowd because, when you look at what happens going into COVID, the brand value of a lot of biopharmas shot up. Everyone was contributing to the betterment of public health and trying to contribute to COVID, and certainly we did as well. But as things settled out of COVID, we saw actually negative brands value in many of our, peer companies, but ours actually shot up. And I think that goes back to one, you have a long-term plan and be able to execute it. The betterment of, really coming together as one CSL brand and then executing that in maybe some differentiated ways that, really gets people's attention. So while the trend was for brand value to decrease coming out of COVID, ours actually shot up. And what's really interesting, it's up 30%, year over year. We're actually up 80% since 2020. So I think it's just a good example of plan your work and work your plan. And look, none of this would happen without the wonderful team that we have in place as well, Deborah.
Well, congratulations. I mean, 80% is absolutely unheard of. But you say you make it sound easy. And I know it's not. I know it's not. But just give the audience, if you don't mind, an example of how you did differentiate yourself or how you continue to differentiate yourself.
Yeah. It's really interesting because especially in an industry that is so it's not a copycat industry in biopharma, but the competition's pretty intense. And so all the large pharmas look at each other and try to kind of take a step back. And when we were going about doing this, we said, you know what, let's do a pause and reflect and kind of say, what is it that's real for CSL? And some of the things that we really differentiated was our purpose. A lot of companies, we did this about 8 years ago before it became really popular. We have banished our vision, mission, and just came down with a really clear purpose that really engaged our employees and others. We took a step back and really went through a really rigorous brand positioning. The company had never had that before as well. And then also our employer brands, which is connected back to our overall brands and those kind of things. And all that connected together. And I think that goes back to the value of having one global communications and brand function, because they do go hand in glove. And we work very closely with our marketing colleagues across the company as well, because the lines are blurred between communications and marketing and brand. It's all together, one. And I think, we had a bit of some foresight in terms of how we wanted to present ourselves to the world. When we started in 2014, the CEO at the time said, well, CSL is the largest company no one has heard of. And he retired last year. And one of the last things he said is, people are no longer saying that. And so I think that's the testament of, the plan has worked. You stay with it, you show some flexibility, be progressive, engage the team, and don't just follow the traditional ways of doing things. I get so many questions from people who come from other organizations anymore, and there's like, well, how come we do it this way and the rest of pharma does it this way? And I think there's an advantage of us, being more on the progressive side over the last 10 years of try things. When it doesn't work, you fail fast and pick yourself up and move on. But, some of the things that we're doing has paid off. And it just takes a little bit of time to get there, Deborah.
No, I agree with you very much so. And I do want to get to purpose, but since this is so much, since this extraordinary growth has been measured in terms of brand value, I'm just curious as a general question, why is it so important, especially to a biotech giant like CSL, that brand value matters? Other people might think, oh, it should be patients or healthcare or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Well, even if you play that out a little bit more, one of the things that I see a lot, people jump to the reputation of a
Mhm.
company automatically. And I always go, let's do a pause and reflect, time out. How are we investing in the brands? Because at the end of the day, the brand is the promise, the commitment that an organization makes to its stakeholders, whether it's employees, investors, media, communities where you operate. Like, that's where you need to invest, is in the brands. And then how you live up to that brand promise is your reputation. And I see so many people just automatically jumping over to managing the reputation, and you lose the opportunity to build your brand for what you want it to represent. And I think we did it in a very methodical way, going brand, build that up, and what that means, and then living up to it. And we've actually been tracking our reputation, and this is an initiative we've had over the last probably last year or so. And so, in one parts of our business, in terms of plasma collection, we're actually 20% above our competition in terms of being preferred for our donors. So that's a differentiated way of doing your business. And so it's all kind of coming into place. It's great to see it, but look, we're not resting on our laurels. We still have a lot of work to do, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you in terms of how do you bring your purpose to life and continue to improve, and not just say, well, we're the fastest growing brand in biopharma, our work is done and off we go. Like, we continue to build off of that, especially with the experience that we have with our donors and patients. And that's a big body of work that we have going on, heading into the future.
Oh no, that and you've always been so patient focused,
Mm,
and really about living your values. So I think that, talk about interconnections. There's certainly one there. You started to talk a little bit about flexibility in terms of acting progressively, small p in terms of being flexible, failing fast, and so on. And you have seen such remarkable growth and transformation. From the number of employees you have to the number of countries you serve, and so on. Now, how is it possible to grow so much without experiencing some challenges? You talk flexibility, you talk purpose. Are they all related? And then we can talk about purpose per se. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, make no mistake about it. We have our challenges just like any other organization. My gosh, I mean, who would have thought COVID? I mean, everyone had to really change their approach, how they engaged, how they communicated, how they marketed. I mean, I think we learned a lot of it. And so, make no mistake about it. At CSL, we certainly have our share of challenges. Competition becomes more intense. But, one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I think that goes back to the legacy of being a company that's been around, and that is to be comfortable disrupting yourself and disrupting your space. So let me give you a great example. CSL has been a leader in bleeding disorders for 50 years. We've been at it for many, many decades, have had a number of products that are market leading. And in fact, the one recombinant that we have right now, Adelvion, is the clear market leader on that. Like the share is unbelievable. Well, it would be easy just to say, you know what, we're going to let Adelvion ride out and go on. But what we said was, look, we're a leader in the area of hemophilia and bleeding disorders. And so we invested and we produced our very first gene therapy for those who have bleeding disorders, hemophilia B. And will it disrupt Adelvion, this market leading product? Absolutely. And you want to know why? We're in it to win it, and we're in it for the long term. And so when you're disrupting yourself on a regular basis, you continue to grow, you continue to be profitable, you continue to be sustainable, and you continue to be relevant. And so don't wait for your competition to push you to be, disrupting yourself. I mean, we can look at case studies, over the years, Kodak, Blockbuster, et cetera, who just rested on their laurels. And so we have taken an attitude of we want to disrupt ourselves all the time. And when you're able to do that, you continue to grow, you continue to be relevant, and you don't rest on the laurels. Like that's part of the culture of CSL, disrupting ourselves.
No, that takes amazing courage, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful because if you look at certain lists, whether it's the Fortune 500 or whatever it is, and you see how few companies are still there that were there, several decades ago, it does talk about disruption. It's amazing because people talk about disruption, but they don't seem to do it to
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It almost has to be self-inflicted, and it's a mindset because it's really easy just to say, boy, so we have this product, there's the cash cow, it's going very, very well. But when you're a leader in your space, you have to behave like one. And that's exactly it. That's exactly it. We've been in the rare disease space for a long time. A lot of big biopharmas are now jumping in our space, and we know that. And so that's it. You just continue to invest in yourself, but most importantly, continue to deliver to the patients and public health for the people who really need it.
Well, you might actually be transforming the term of what leadership means. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, I was going to you talk about this disruption mindset, and maybe that is part of the company DNA or the company culture. But we've talked for a long time about how purpose is also a very
Hmm.
big part of the company DNA? I mean, you're obviously one of the key champions within the organization for purpose. I mean, how do you ensure that it is part of the DNA?
Yeah, it's funny. It's part of the DNA because we talk about why we show up every day, and that goes back to purpose. And people get so confused when you have a PowerPoint, you have a vision and mission, and people really can't tell the difference between the two. But purpose is essentially why an organization exists. And we've made it really, really clear. Like, we're here to improve patients' lives, sometimes save them, as well as improving public health, as well as saving lives there. And we made a conscious decision before this became sexy and popular, purpose and those kind of things. And we continue to talk about why we show up at work. It's funny. One of the first uh, things I had a aha moment 10 years ago was like, no one's talking about the share price or investors here. Everyone's talking about patients and those kind of things. And it finally dawned on me after years, yo, Farina, knucklehead, you're not paying attention to this culture here. It's all about patience. And I realize it's the red thread that keeps everyone together at CSL. And I think the differentiator here, Deborah, is CSL was started 100+ years ago to serve patients, not necessarily shareholders or other stakeholders. Like, it was started to provide medicines to the people of Australia because Australia was so far away, back in 1916. And so that red thread of focusing on people, getting the medicines to them, continue to be, that steward for them, continues to be relevant for CSL. And here we are now providing medicines in over 100 countries. We have operations in more than 40 countries, more than 32,000 employees. But that red thread of when we started continues to serve us so well today. So a lot has changed, but some things haven't as well.
No, and I do think that sometimes the most vibrant sense of purpose is when you do go back to your origins, and if you can keep the ethos of those origins alive. And even though you're disrupting to respond to your original intent, which is to continue to save lives. I mean, it's again, sometimes it can sound simple, but
Mm,
it's also tricky to shepherd. Let me ask you something, just because I believe you participated in the survey that the Internationalists did recently. And you and I have been talking about this and writing about this for a long time, just about brand purpose and the purpose-led organizations. You were part of that first Discovering Purpose
yeah,
handbook that I wrote for the ANA and
yep,
and so on. um, we've been doing a survey among marketers for almost a decade now, just about their attitudes toward purpose. And this last survey was the most surprising, in that we were seeing a lot of purpose related challenges. And I know
mm,
some words can get overused, and purpose might be in that category, but a lot of marketers expressed difficulties that they were having, with communicating purpose,
yeah,
whether it's purpose washing, whether it's potential backlash, whether it's purpose fatigue, or this perceived disconnect between values and actions. So, do you think it is indeed more difficult to communicate this now? Maybe because of geopolitical events, or just where people's mindsets are in a post-COVID world?
yeah. I think a couple things on that one. It has become much more difficult to articulate the purpose of an organization. I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of noise, and those kind of things. My biggest concern has been purpose washing, and that is, you know. so and so in the marketing department comes up with this grand idea to have a campaign around purpose and those kind of things, and which is fine for a couple weeks, but it's not really inherent into the culture of the company. And to be a true purpose driven organization, it needs to start at the top. It needs to start with the CEO talking about the values, talking about why we're a purpose driven organization. You have to be authentic. We're at CSL, we're in the business of saving lives and protecting public health. But you know what? If an organization is true to itself and whatever it's producing or doing, whatever it's a service or whatever, and it's truly, purpose driven, say that. Don't try to be something that you're not. And I think a lot of times people see when it's not authentic. And so you have to be true to yourself, whether, the employees, your investors, others, they'll see right through it. And don't shortcut on that one. But to me, the biggest one is it has to have buy-in from the C-suite. You talk about it day in and day out. It's part of the culture. It's not a carve off of a campaign by someone in marketing who has an idea, and like it has to be inherently woven in there, and it takes time to get there as well. And I think what you see, because this a lot of this sort of more purpose driven articulation has probably been around the last 5 years or so. And I think what you're seeing now is the true purpose organizations are sort of surfacing, and the frauds are not. And that's what happens over time. And we saw the same thing around sustainability 20 years ago. The true companies that are truly sustainable and protecting the planet and doing the right things, they separate themselves over time. And that's what we're seeing now, I think, in purpose washing, Deborah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because sometimes sustainability is almost cropping up now, as if it's a contemporary thing and it's now a contemporary mission. The minute
Yeah,
that they start a new title like Chief Sustainability Officer, you know that it's like the concept du jour. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
that is something that happens. But I do think that societal change is happening so much faster. It seems like we just catapult from crisis to crisis, whether it's a pandemic or wars or emotional reactions in the street to things and so on. So it probably, intimidates a lot of people, particularly when marketers, even though, as we know, purpose should be driven by not only the CEO, but be embraced by the entire organization. Unfortunately, marketers or communication people are the ones that have to express it,
Exactly.
have to push it and well, push it. But there's another thing that seems to be happening, which is kind of the opposite of purpose washing, which is what some are calling the green hush, where some people are doing some great things, but they're almost afraid to talk about them because it might look like they're trying to be too trendy or on message or something. So what a complex world we live in.
Yeah, look, and I think this is the new norm, right? So, people were coming out of COVID, that people were like, oh, thank God that's over. Well, you know what? This is the new norm we're living in, because when you kind of think about it, we get news instantaneously anymore around the world, and things are happening around the world, whether it's Ukraine, whether Asia, China, and we have all this noise going through with us. And it's really interesting when you pay attention to it, because anymore issues and crises, the acceleration of it goes up, it goes down, and out of cycle. And the acceleration and how quick it is furious. But that's the world now. And so that's why, plan your work, work your plan. You're going to have your issues, crisis du jour, deal with it, move on. But if you don't have a plan, then you're in real big trouble, because then it's just a matter of, just going along for the ride, and no one's sustainable that way.
So it sounds like that plan has to be pretty solid. I guess there's times when it might have to adapt or change a bit, but if that plan is truly a kind of true north indicator,
Yeah.
then I guess you're okay with it. And you've always been, as long as I've known you, you've really been an advocate for taking a longer term view.
Mm. Well, no doubt. And you know how much I feel about content. You know, content is king, especially with the number of journalists decreasing over the last 20 years. And how do you have more owned versus earned and paid and all that kind of stuff? But one of the things is like you have to own it. In other words, it's easy to say, well, this is going on over here, or this is. So what are we going to do about it to fill the void? And you know, one of the things that we did was our goals was to be a content powerhouse to give people good content, especially patients in rare diseases, because there's some content out there that is better than others, and we saw there was an opportunity for us to kind of give some meaningful content to some of our patients, and it's worked out really well in a differentiated way that's been helpful to our brand. But at the end of the day, it's about again working your plan and but things change and you have to adapt to it. So a great example is AI, right? So it blows your mind when you think about it. 18 months ago, there really wasn't AI and it just kind of blew up. And so now is how do you embrace this while still driving your content strategy? That's how you adapt and be able to bring out the best in the technology to continue to perform. Because at the end of the day, it's performance, but things are always changing and you have to adapt to it. I kind of like that because I kind of get bored easily if you haven't figured that out after a while.
Yeah, well, you say that, but you have at least a decade of consistency at CSL, but you've done something different, it seems like every 6 months in terms of forwarding things. Now you haven't answered the $64 million question about how AI does affect your content strategy, but I guess that's an evolving issue.
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to harness the attributes of AI, but also trying to be measured and have some rigor and discipline. There's upsides and downsides to it. And so I think we are just like everyone else. We're doing some piloting, we're looking at it and those kind of things. I do believe at the end of the day, AI could be incredibly helpful in terms of productivity, but we'll always need people, whether it's as editors or judgment and those kind of things. So I don't think it's either or. My sense is it's a great productivity tool for us to have, but it'll never replace people. And I think that's where a lot of people are ending up in terms of their opinion of it. But who knows? Maybe in a year from now, we'll have a better sense. But it's probably one of the most revolutionary technologies that I've seen in my career, especially when you think about it over the last 18 months.
Yeah, yeah, both in terms of content and imaging. You said something about becoming a content powerhouse, and it made me think for a minute that maybe another definition of strong brands is that they're also sources of information.
Hmm.
And I mean, trusted sources of information. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's quite interesting when you also talk about the AI issue.
Yeah, and look, I think every organization has to find its sort of horizon and niche. And so when we started this thing, we saw there was actually a void of good content in rare diseases and public health. And what we said was, look, we want to provide content that's not patting us on the back of how great we are. We wanted content from us as a leader in this space, and that has really worked out very, very well for us. I'll give you a great example. We started our Facebook social media channel probably about 3 years ago or so. And the approach that we took was we wanted it to be content heavy. Long story short, we're almost at 500,000 followers on Facebook well above what I would say big pharma. And we just started this a couple years ago. And how we're winning is through meaningful content. So your son or daughter going off to college and they have a bleeding disorder. How can they have a good, wonderful experience in college? I mean, it's those kind of meaningful, thoughtful pieces of content where we're actually helping patients and their caretakers to have better share of life. As we know, people don't go online anymore, they live online. And so when you're giving and providing good, fresh content every day, you're really starting to develop a shared life. And, I've speaking with Sebastian a number of times on this, and I know you have as well, but like we're partnering on this, and that's how you sort of bring it to life when you have that share life with patients and making a difference.
No, and particularly in your case, because it may be a lifetime, and that information is also
Right.
quite practical and everyday living. And it's about, forgive the term, but it's about living. So here we are just having another general conversation, and just as an aside, for those who don't know, Sebastian Jesperson has literally written the book on share of life, and I'm sure there'll be a little bit more on that later. Because I do believe there might be a new edition of it coming out in time for
Hmm.
the Can Ad Festival.
Oh,
But you
nice.
just, yeah, isn't that great? But you just mentioned another milestone with 500,000 Facebook followers. So all these milestones, I mean, it is to be applauded, particularly for someone who doesn't like to do the same thing all the time. um, but let's just say I know that we're going to be talking for a long time about other milestones, but you've witnessed so much growth. What do you see as ahead? For
Yeah.
you. I mean, whether it's challenges, whether it's the next, mountain to climb. What's next?
Yeah, one of the great things at CSL is we've been a leader in the space for a long time, and so we, like I said a little bit earlier, it's like we were accustomed to disrupting. So one of the things that I'm really excited about at CSL right now is the user experience. And so, one part of our business is we have plasma collection centers, about 350 of them in the U.S., Germany, Hungary, other parts of Europe, et cetera. And we are really revolutionizing the donor experience. So, I'll give you a couple examples. Like in the past, it would take probably about 2 hours or so for a person to donate plasma. By the time they get into the door, go through the important things that you need to go through, et cetera, and get out. But we've been able to digitize a lot of our work. We now have an app where the donors can have an experience where it's less time. We now have this wonderful new technology that reduces the amount of time for donors to donate by a third. So we're really improving the whole donor experience, and we're really disrupting the industry. It's another great example where when your leader behave like one, and that's the one I would pay attention to is how we're really improving the experience, whether it's with donors for plasma collection or with patients as well with devices and those kind of things. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the experience. It's all about the experience. So I'm really excited on some of the things that we have coming up on that front.
Well, I am looking forward to our next conversation, which will be centered around experience in many, many different ways. But it's not only terrific to hear these kinds of results, but it's inspiring. It's inspiring, I think, to individuals, whether they're patients or whether they're staff members or part of, dare I say, your ecosystem. But it also is inspiring to be in this business and know that there's things that you can do to help further the purpose, the drive, the values of a company. So this was, I think, just a wonderful reminder, despite a lot of sometimes concern and negativism, that a lot can be possible. Again, if you plan your work and work your plan.
Yeah, yeah. And look, we're not short of obstacles and challenges. I mean, some days, especially since we've been sort of standing this up, some days you take a step back and two forward, and then some days it's two forward, vice versa. But at the end of the day, it's about the due diligence, really having a plan and staying with it, and then being able to adjust. Like I mentioned before, we want it to be content powerhouse, and then AI comes in. It's like, all right, bring it on, embrace it. And it's just so rewarding and refreshing to have that, and sort of like reinvent yourself almost every year. Now I know on my team, people get exhausted from me, but like that's how you stay relevant and that's how you stay fresh as well.
I agree. And that's how you stay enthusiastic. And certainly one of the wonderful reasons that I love talking to you is that joy and that enthusiasm always shows through.
Oh, thank you.
You love your work,
I do.
so that's great. Well, listen, always a pleasure, and I look forward to the next chapter. And again, congratulations on another significant milestone. It's great news.
Thank you, Deborah. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. But again, it's all about the team. The team gets
All
it
right.
done. But thank
And
you.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt, and I know who's leading the team.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Take care. The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.